Welcome to the Working Genius podcast, where we discuss anything and everything related to the 6 types of working genius and how it impacts your work and your life. I'm Pat Lencioni. I'm your co-host today. No, what am I talking about? I'm the host. I have 2 co-hosts with me. We've got Cody. How you doing, Cody Thompson?
Great. Excited to be back, Pat.
Great to see you. Tracy, how are you?
Hey there.
Tracy Noble. We've got Matt, our engineer, not on mic today, but he's keeping us in line. Cody, what's our topic today?
Well, you can't see it, Pat, because we're on a podcast, but I have a birthday cake in front of me that I just blew the candles out on. No, it's our Working Genius birthday podcast, but the topic today is Here's your birthday gift.
Here's your birthday gift. And it's worth noting that this is our first podcast in our season 2. So we're back and we're excited. And we're recording this on the day, the 1-year anniversary, the birthday of our launch of Working Genius. And so we're very excited, and we're excited about our topic today. Here's your birthday gift. Now, there's a few different applications of this. One, it's because it's our birthday. And at the end of this podcast, we're going to give you a gift, free gift, that we'll tell you about then. But what we really want to talk about today is the fact that our working geniuses are a gift. As we say, this is a God-given talent that we have. And one of the questions I've been asked recently by a couple of people is, hey, Pat, do you think this changes over time? Or is this something that's always the same? And my best understanding after thinking about all this for 15 or 16 months is I don't think it changes over time. I think we're giving this when we're born. We're given this when we're born. I think I was born with this. It was a God-given gift. Throughout my life, my working geniuses have not changed. And I can go back to my earliest time and recognize those. And we want to really understand that and nurture our gifts, because when they're a gift, they're meant to be used. Does that make sense to you guys?
Totally. And I find ourselves talking about this as exactly like you said, a God-given gift or natural wiring. Like this is how we were created or wired internally to receive joy and energy in the activities of work. And so one of the analogies we try to draw is like the Myers-Briggs, for example. That's your preference. And so the idea of if you were to try to tell like an introvert, hey, you know what you need to do? I know you like getting energy. You'd naturally get energy from being by yourself. You should work on getting it when you're with other people. That would be like a total violation of how they're wired. And so I think there's completely similar in the working genius model. The same goes for me is when I think back in my life, I don't think my gifts have changed at all. In fact, my awareness of them is the only thing that's changed. And that allowed me to look back with clear vision about why I struggled in certain circumstances.
Right. Tracy, do you look back and can you see the gifts that you have now as manifest themselves when you were young?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, certainly there are other factors that come into play, like wounds and, issues we've had over the years. But certainly growing up, I was an E. I had the genius of enablement, and that was clear through my childhood, and a D. People always came to me for advice. And that started at a very early age. So yeah.
Right. And sometimes the best way we can recognize that is realizing that our working frustrations were the same when we were kids too.
Yeah.
And boy, I'm just finishing up the book and it should come out next year about working genius. And I talk in there about the fact that it would have been nice if I'd have understood those geniuses and frustrations then, because my dad used to wake me up every Saturday morning to do the lawn with him. And I hated it. And I didn't know why. I thought I was a bad son. I would still do it because I loved my dad. But I realized he wanted me to do everything as an E and a T. Follow me around, Pat, do everything I tell you to do and do it perfectly. And I'll tell you if you did anything wrong. And as an I and a D, I really wanted him to give me freedom to go mow the lawn the way I wanted and to design my own solutions and all that kind of stuff. I was an I and a D from the moment I was born, which is why I finally got, and it's funny, my dad, God rest his soul, because he didn't have money growing up as a kid and he didn't get invited to use his genius. It was to get a job and support a family. But when I went to college, he told me, Pat, you should study accounting and computers. He sent me to college, first generation to go to college, said, you should study accounting and computers. Well, he had no idea what my geniuses were. He just knew that was where jobs were. And I took my lowest grade I ever got was in accounting. And I took computers, and after one day I quit because I said, this is miserable. But when we know what our geniuses are, what our gifts are, what God has made us to do, we're meant to use those. And I'm sure if my dad had seen on a piece of paper, oh, my son's he's an inventor and a discerner, he might have said, well, maybe it would be okay if you studied some other things that were more interesting for you.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I totally agree. Like when we are given gifts, we're meant to use them. I think the first step too is like appreciation of the gift, like to genuinely sit and say, this is how I'm wired. and I can appreciate this. The analogy that I just thought of is I have an identical twin brother, and I remember Christmases. My parents would mostly have to get us, like, if I got a blue shirt, he'd get the same shirt but in green, and so they would try to like match up our presents every time. But whenever they would stray from these identical but fairly minor different presents, they would buy, for example, like a bike and then get somebody else a snowboard or something. And I remember like enviously looking at some gifts that my brother received without really just sitting in appreciation of my own. And I think we have a tendency to do that, even in Working Genius, is to say, oh, I actually think that the world values or other people value this gift. Maybe I should try to be that. When the best thing we can do for ourselves is to sit, appreciate the way that God wired us, and then go out in the world and do the thing that he intended us to do.
The other day, a woman came over, a family friend, and she was in our kitchen talking to us. And I know her, she has 5 boys. They're all massive. They're huge. And one of their boys is 6'8". Now you'd think if you're 6'8", and he has been since he was like 16, he just doesn't like basketball. He's not really an athlete, doesn't love sports. And she told us he just figured out that he loves music, and he is amazing at writing music. He went and got a guitar, and he's already become an expert at it. And even his roommates in college were like, "Where did this come from? When do you do this?" And when you have a gift, you're meant to use it. I think we've talked before about Andre Agassi was a great tennis player, but he didn't like it. Yeah. It wasn't really a gift. It was something they drilled into him when he was a kid because his parents said, "You're going to be great at this." And he said he didn't like it. And there's a lot of professional athletes who are very good at something, but it's not really a gift. It's something they've grind at. And we are meant to use the gifts that God gave us. And when we go throughout our lives denying those gifts or trying to get good at things we don't love, it's really kind of tragic.
Yeah. The other thing that I think is important in this conversation is most of the time we talk about, we named it Working Genius. And I think people tend to take that name and the application and apply it just to their job. Right. Oh, I need to be able to, which is great. You spend 8 hours a day at work. Hopefully you get a chance to use your geniuses there and reorganize your work. But you can use your gift in every hour outside of work as often as you can, like in your marriage and with your friend group. And I think that's another way that people can tap into this, just to say, even understanding the ways, Tracy, the way you bring discernment to relational conversations with your friends. I mean, that is something that you should own and be proud of, and then actually go out and find opportunities to do because you're serving them.
Yeah. Sure. And I find myself doing that more and more now that we have this language, because I know it is a gift. So I tend to want to utilize it more. So it's actually, it's kind of fun.
I totally agree.
We could probably call it the doing genius, what you're good at doing. I mean, right now we're recarpeting and putting new floors in our house. And Laura was like, "Okay, I got to have Tracy come over." I said, "What for?" Because I'm not going to do this until she weighs in and tells me it's good, because she has discernment. And so it's a neat thing. It is more than just your job, so to speak, but it's what we work at, what we're doing. Now, so the question becomes, can their gifts change over time? And should they? Somebody said to me recently on a webinar, they said, "Hey, Pat, should I try to be getting really good at my frustrations?" And my answer is no. My answer is, don't try to be great at something you're not naturally gifted at. Now, that doesn't mean we don't have to do it. So, Cody, what are your thoughts on that? And Matt was talking to us before about, we do have to do things sometimes. We have to arrange things so that we can get through the things we're not great at. But that doesn't make it a genius.
I think that this is really important because after a year of using this with teams, one of the main pieces of pushback we get is like, well, that's kind of Pollyanna-ish, right? Like, you can't just do 2 of the things in your job or in your life. You have to do all of them.
Absolutely.
And so we say every job is a 6-letter job. We're going to continue to say that. And we should know what the order is and spend the most time in the ones that, correspond to our geniuses. But I think that knowing that, you go in and you can sort of like build structures or hacks around your working frustrations. I think when people ask that question, should I work on my working frustration? What they're really asking is, don't I have to be good at this? Sure, you have to do some of this, but never be of the mindset that you need to enjoy doing that. That's just never going to be fulfilling task for you. So it's actually easier to go in, like Matt's, my favorite thing is when he had the whiteboard in our office that he wrote in marker, the T zone. He hates tenacity work. So he would go into the T zone and sit down and realize this is not going to be my favorite part of my day, but I'm going to sit here and get this done so that I can go back and do the other thing. So you can work on it in terms of finding ways to do it, but it's never a gift in terms of you getting joy and fulfillment from it.
Yeah, I think recognizing that it's your frustration and not feeling guilty about that actually allows you to deal with it and fight through it better. Because there's no, when I was a kid, if my dad would have said, "Hey, Pat, I know you're not an E or a T, but I need your help out in the lawn. So just suck it up for an hour and we'll get this done. And I'm with you." I'd have been like, "Okay, Dad, you know it." But I always walked around feeling like I'm so crappy that I'm terrible at this and I don't like it. I'm a bad son and a bad helper. Sometimes recognizing it's your frustration allows you to push through it.
And I actually think most of us have done this, intuitively to some degree, even without this language. Like I didn't have the word tenacity to know that I wasn't good at finishing things, but I had a 25 years of schooling to know that I wasn't good at finishing things and that I was forgetful and didn't push projects through. And the smallest hack arounds, we build scaffolding around our weaknesses to try to help us do them. Like I must set 5 Siri reminders a day just to be like, "Hey, don't forget that you need to finish this thing," which someone with tenacity is like, how could you even need that? I have a list right here. I keep this list updated and it has everything I need. My wife has a grocery list for 4 different stores that we go to. And I'm like, "Hey, I'll go there even with the list and not get all the things on there." So we do find ways to build around that, but it's never going to be enjoyable.
But you know what I did? What's interesting about that, and this is we're kind of going deep here, but what I did as a kid, and this is for a variety of reasons, family background and wounds and all that, I actually got great at what my weaknesses were. I got straight A's in school, never missed a class, recopied my notes every day, and it was totally against my genius. And it really screwed me up because then I got out of college and I took a job that was terrible for me. But because I got good grades and I learned how to interview well, I took a job that was exactly against my gifts and my genius and thought, well, I should be able to push through again. And I should be able to push through again. So I got used to denying my gifts and leaning into my frustrations in a way that kind of screwed me up for a while because it made me think. People would say, "You're really good at details and you're really good at follow through." And I'd be like, "No, I'm just good at making myself miserable." I was a distance runner too. I was a miler and a 2-miler. I don't know that anybody enjoys running 2 miles and making themselves almost puke every time, but I got really good at it. I remember hearing this story. I love this story about this. One of the Kenyan runners, Kenya is known for distance runners. And this guy had a long career, Olympic gold medals, and he made money doing it and all this stuff. And when he retired, somebody interviewed him and they said, "So are you going to run a lot now just for pleasure?" And he goes, "I'm never going to run again."
Yeah.
And they said, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "I hate running. I was poor. I did it to make money. Running is not fun. I'm going to sit around and eat and get fat." And I just thought that was such a funny thing. He wasn't doing it because it was a natural joy and a gift. He did it because he was forcing himself to do it for an end result. But in life, we're much better off when we can lean into our gifts and do what gives us joy and energy.
I just reread Pat's version of his book, and one of the parts that I thought was super applicable for this, the Working Genius book, is I love that part, Pat. There's these young people at this organization that are in the book, and they say this one guy hates one of his parts of his job. He's not that good at it. It involves some tenacity work, and he says, "Well, I have to pay my dues." And your response that you wrote of the leader in that book is is that really the way we need to think about this? But I think that the world does have that mentality, which is hey, listen, your first job, doesn't matter what it is, even if it's miserable, you got to pay your dues so that you can then find a role that more suits your skills. And I think what's great about Working Genius is I don't think we need to fall victim to that in our workplace, in our lives, in our home. Let's just find ways to appreciate one another, to know what your gifts are, what mine are, and organize it. It means, we're all going to have to pay some dues on some level, but the idea that is the way we look at work is really sort of sad,
Cody, it reminds me that first job I had was at a management consulting firm. And pretty much what we've done at the Table Group is for the first 15 years, that's mostly what we were. Now we do all kinds of different things, but I remember I was there, and what they did is they would hire young people to do a job that was mostly enablement and tenacity. They would say, we're going to give you stuff to do, and you're going to do it well and do it accurately, and you're not going to ask questions, and you're going to finish things, and you're going to grind. And the ones that were best at that, they would then promote. And I was not good at that. And the partner on my case, who's a CEO now of a big company, she said to me, Pat, you would be a great partner here. Because she could see I had, discernment, which is what you need to have a partner, and invention and coming up with new ideas. But this job, this analyst job that we have you in, this isn't your thing. And I was like, no, it's not my thing. I hate it. And she helped make me available to the market. You know what I mean? She helped me move on to do something else. But what was funny is they would take people, and the only way you could become a partner is if you demonstrated that you were great at doing something that was completely different. It's like when people only take the best salespeople and make them sales managers. Sometimes what you end up with is a bad sales manager, and you lose your best salesperson.
Yeah.
They're different geniuses.
Totally. And so I think that this podcast, when we talk about appreciating your gift, sharing it with others, I think the other thing that we can do is look at the people around us and understand their gifts. And then it's a gift in and of itself to celebrate that person for what they bring to the table. So that's what I find is really interesting is like all of these tools, Myers-Briggs, StrengthsFinder, ones that we've used in the past. I know, and you say this a lot, we don't come out of the womb thinking about other people. We come out of the womb thinking about ourselves. I have almost always thought about those tools as a way of better understanding myself. Oh, this is so fun. I get to learn more about who I am and what I'm good at. Maybe by nature of the fact that there's 16 personalities or there's 35 strengths, I didn't take all the time to really digest and celebrate the other types the same way. And I think what Working Genius does because of its simplicity is I get to go to friends or my wife or relatives and even my parents. I've had conversations and be like, hey, you know what? God wired you this way, and I love that. And it's different than the way he wired me. And I just want you to know that like it's so meaningful when you get to bring that to the table, whether it's at a family, holiday or in a working team. So I think that that's part of it too, is this is everybody's birthday gift, the gift you were given at birth, and we can appreciate all of them.
And you know what's funny? As a parent, I can't give my kids a gift. That comes from God. I can't say, well, I'm really good at this. I want them to be good at it too. The gift I can give them is understanding what theirs are and allowing them to embrace their own.
Totally.
You know what, Pat, we get this question all the time. So we have this assessment. How young would you recommend someone taking this assessment?
Yeah,
what's the cutoff?
What we're going to have to do is develop an assessment for kids because the questions tend to be somewhat professional. And, do people in your workplace think that you have good discernment? A 7-year-old's going to be, what the hell does that mean? Or heck does that mean, hopefully, if they're 7. But I think that the Working Genius methodology definitely applies to them. I just don't know if the assessment does.
Sure.
But so what we should do is figure out a way that a parent could kind of co-assess with a child based on what they already see, rather than asking a 7-year-old to answer questions and try to discern it that way.
Absolutely. But I do think a high school aged kid could potentially take this assessment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And remember, it's qualitative. So you have them take it, then you have them read the descriptions. And it's the descriptions, in the report where it says people, like other people say this about me. A high school kid would go, oh yeah, my friends tell me this all the time.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Well, I think I think we should tackle that. I think that we've had enough people reach out that say, hey, this would make such a difference in education or in the way that I help my kid with my homework or whatever else. And I think even Bo on our staff, he has 4 kids, all under 11. And I think he's like pretty clear what his 11-year-old is. And he kind of has this theory of like, I think I know one of them for the 5-year-old. And so it would be fun to actually explore that and kind of figure that out.
Well, my 15-year-old is a WI, a wonder and invention. That does not lend itself to homework on time and grinding for grades and all that other kind of stuff. His head is more in the clouds. And I mean, it's so interesting. He said to me recently, one of his teachers really annoys him because in class, he's saying things that are not like really connected to the material. And as a wonder and inventor, he wants this person to be more head in the clouds and thinking about the bigger picture. And now that I understand that, I know that I have to expect certain things differently from my 15-year-old than I might have from my others. But at the same time, I need to help him do workarounds on things that are his frustration because he still wants to do well. But I also know if I expect him to do well in the same way as his brothers, that might push him into a place of frustration. Anyway, it totally applies to parenting. Boy, I wish I'd known what these things were. I wish kids came out of the womb with a little tag on their toe that said, Matthew's a WD. You should keep this in mind. Because I look back and I realize, oh, had I known that, I would have parented very differently.
Totally.
I have to say this too, you guys. I think about toys when I was a kid. Toys that made me read the directions, hated them. Detailed things, like even to this day, like one of my sons is a T. He loves putting together Legos and he does it perfectly. He follows the directions and he's the only one in my family that was really loved doing it. And because I would look at it and go, I want to make something that doesn't exist. And he'd have the little map out and he'd be finding exactly the right color and the number that went with it. And my brother, when I was a kid, wanted me to play these board games that had to do with numbers and rolling dice and figuring out the direction of things. And I hated it. And I didn't understand why. But now I realize there's certain toys that were fun when I was a kid that intrigued my, invention and discernment, and certain toys and games I hated. So I think that that's probably what parents can do is they can go back and observe their children and help them figure out what their working genius is. Probably less of an assessment and more of an observation and discussion.
Sure.
That's right. Well, we're a year into it, so we got to get going on that child assessment. I love that.
We should have that done by next week, right, Tracy?
Yeah, exactly.
Of course.
That's
I'll get right on that.
It'll be easy. Hey, but you know what else we're going to do is we're going to give the people listening to this podcast a gift. So we're going to give you a birthday gift. Tracy, tell us what that is.
So we are going to give you one free assessment license to share with a friend, a colleague, a spouse, a child. All you have to do is go to our website, workinggenius.com. And then as you're checking out in the promotional code, just put the word birthday and you will get a free license. And it expires on November 12th. So act quickly.
Act
what a gift to give somebody a gift that they can pass on to somebody else and watch them come alive. One of the things we're going to be doing on our podcast in season 2 is we're going to be doing this person on the street, we're going to call it. Every episode, we're going to try to bring in a person, the guy that delivers our mail or the gal that comes in and takes care of the plants in our office, or we're going to go down on the street and just pull somebody at the point of a gun to come up to our office and be on our podcast. Some stranger that we're going to sit down and do their assessment in 10 minutes, and then we're going to review it with them live on our show and watch people kind of awaken to their gifts and understand how they apply in their lives. So starting next time, we're going to be having guests on who are going to be breaking down their working genius. And Tracy, we've been doing our working genius certification program for the last 6 months, and they're all selling out. All these people are getting certified so they can go be a certified instructor. And one of the favorite things Cody and I like to do is pop in and watch them do their day 2 debrief, where we give them a free license to go practice on somebody they know, and they come back the next day and talk about what happened and the stories they tell us about helping their spouse or a colleague or somebody in their family discover their genius. It's so fun to hear.
It's the best part of the training.
It is the best part of the training.
Amazing.
So that's what we want to do with everybody here. We hope you'll go out and make somebody's day and give them the gift of discovering their gift. And so that brings us to the end of today's podcast, our first one in season 2. Thanks, everybody. And we're looking forward to some of your stories. If you can send them to us about what you did with this gift, we'll share some of those on our next episode too. All right, that's it for today. We'll see you next week on the Working Genius Podcast. God bless.